Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Workers Podcast. On this edition, we'll address a subject that we've had a lot of inquiries about. We'll look at Division C of the Labor Code and zone in on Part 4. This part deals with severance pay. I'm so happy to have as my guest today the Deputy Labor Commissioner. His name is Mr. Pascal Kentish. So happy you could join us.
Good afternoon and happy to be here.
All right. Now, I mentioned that you are the Deputy Labor Commissioner, but briefly just tell us a bit about your involvement at the Labor Department and your expertise in this field.
Well, my duties at the Labor Department are many. I am constantly consulted by my colleagues, consulted by members of the public, both employers and employees, and just try to guide people according to the labor laws. You even get inquiries from overseas too, because
Wow.
as you can imagine, there are a few foreign companies operating here.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they get it wrong. And so when they get it wrong, we try to have a meeting with them to try and distill the issues that we keep seeing coming up, because we issue work permits.
Okay.
And so people would issue contracts. And when you look at the contracts, and some of the times they're not in line with the law.
Yeah.
And so if you submit a work permit application with a provision that is not in line with the law, then we are not going to approve or recommend that work permit for approval with a discrepancy in that contract of employment. So all of these, you get phone calls from all over, local, overseas, and it's just a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm there to give my colleagues the necessary support with whatever issues they have. If they aren't certain, they will consult, and so we will brainstorm on it and we move forward.
Excellent. And perhaps maybe I should have asked this question before, but I think our audience could benefit. Just really briefly, tell us a bit about the role of the Labor Department.
The Labor Department is what you call labor administration. And as there's also an International Labor Organization Convention on labor administration. And so we are that public body that looks about the relationship between employers and employees in Antigua and Barbuda. And so the convention asks state parties to provide the necessary services to both employers and employees regarding labor. That's just in a nutshell what the convention talks about. And so our services, on the most part, are supposed to be free. And so Labor Department is that body.
All right, so now for the major issue that we've promised our viewers that we'll dive into today. We're going to be looking at severance. And you'll find severance in Part 4 of Division C of the Labor Code. So everything you need to know about severance is located there. Now, I'm really happy again that we decided to look at this subject matter, because quite often, I can't tell you how many questions I've had, particularly online, with people asking, if I resign my job, how much severance am I entitled to? Or am I entitled to severance? And sometimes it worries me that a lot of folks don't have the full understanding of what severance is, what are the conditions that give rise to severance, how do you become entitled to severance? So I would wish for us to really at some point give some clarity to the whole idea of severance, how it comes about during our discussions today. So let's start. What is severance? What do we mean when we talk about severance, and how might someone find themselves in the situation of being entitled to severance?
So a person is entitled to severance pay if their position is made redundant.
Okay.
That's the only occasion when severance pay is due. So what is redundancy? So we have to define the terms. So redundancy is a situation where by lack of customer orders, retrenchment, installation of labor-saving machinery, and employees going out of business, a force majeure, or any other reason, work which a person was employed to perform has ceased or substantially diminished.
Okay.
That would account for a person's position being made redundant. And so if your position is made redundant, then you become entitled to severance pay. Also, if the business change ownership. So if there's a sale of assets, then by whatever means, then a person becomes entitled to severance pay.
Okay.
So the situation where person want to resign and think that they're entitled to severance pay, that is not so.
Wow.
Because you are voluntarily quitting the job. So you're making a decision to leave employment. And so you're not entitled to anything. What you're entitled to is to give your employer reasonable notice, and the law says so, the notice period.
Yeah.
That you should give. So if you're paid monthly, a month's notice. If you're paid weekly, a week's notice. And come the end of that period, then you receive your last paycheck. If you have any vacation on the books, you're paid for those vacation days. And that's the end of your relationship with your employer. Now you may have a situation where you have mutual separation. You're not entitled to severance pay for mutual separation. What you may be entitled to is some level of compensation. You may have negotiated compensation. You have sickness, prolonged illness. You're not entitled to severance pay for prolonged illness. You're entitled to compensation, but the compensation is calculated at the rate of severance pay. Whether in the collective agreement that was negotiated between employer and the union, or via the labor code. So there's only one occasion in which you're entitled to severance pay, and that is if your position is made redundant.
Yeah.
On no other occasion you're entitled to severance pay. Anything else is some sort of a compensation you'll be getting.
Wow. But I'm really happy that we've given our audience that clarity. Now, tell us a bit, how is severance calculated? And perhaps maybe that's where some of the confusion could have come about, why people think upon resignation, because I'm with the company for 20 years, that you may be entitled to severance, which absolutely, again, is not the case. But so tell us how severance is calculated. So we established already under what condition severance is payable, and we said upon redundancy. Now tell us a bit about the computation. How do we arrive at what formula do we use to arrive at the particular amount that someone may be entitled to upon?
So let me give one more qualifier,
Excellent.
for severance pay. You have to be employed for at least 1 year to be entitled to severance pay. So severance pay is calculated at the rate of 1 day's pay for each month of employment. However, in a decision of the industrial court, it stated that managers are entitled to severance pay at the rate of 1 month's pay for each year. You may have a collective agreement between a company and its workers, which collective agreement was negotiated by the union, their sole bargaining agent. That may have a different mode of calculating the severance pay. So what you find, it is done on a tier basis. So when you look at collective agreements where the severance pay entitlement has been modified, you may find it being done on a tiered basis.
Okay.
So let me explain. So they may have, for the first 2 years of employment, your severance will be calculated at the rate of 1 day pay for each month. For the years 3 to years 5, it may be calculated at 15 days per year. So 1 month's pay for each year of employment will give you 12 days per year. And so when you move up tiers 3 to 5 years, it may be 15 days per year. You may have it further move from 6 to 9 years. That may be another figure, maybe 18 days per year. And then you may have 10 and over, 10 years and over, that may be calculated at probably 20 days per year. You get as severance pay. And that is an enhancement on the 12 days per year. Because it does not move according to years of service via the labor code. So through collective bargaining, you'll find that your entitlement, the rate that you're paid for severance pay is moved according to your years of service with that employer. Sometimes even more advantageous provisions are negotiated where you may get, they may say monthly paid employees are paid at 1 month for each year. Or you may get 1.5 months for each year. There was a decision of the Privy Council some years ago where persons were being made redundant, and the company already had an enhanced severance pay rate. And the union, in negotiating the compensation or the severance pay, let me use severance pay. The severance pay for the workers asked for a higher rate. And the company said, well, the workers are already getting an enhanced severance package. And so they did not yield. The matter went as far as the Privy Council, and the Privy Council ruled, well, the union was in its right to ask for more. And did give more. Right? So it is not etched in stone. It is what you can negotiate as the sole bargaining agent for employees as severance pay when they're on the way out. We had a change in the law in 2019. So there was a situation where if a business was sold and the new owners came in and said, look, we are not going to change anything. You will continue operating as if we're not in the picture. And so once the new owners would have said that, the employees were not entitled to severance pay. But in 2019, that was changed. And so once the business is changing hands, the employers now have to give the employees an option as to whether or not they want the severance pay. So if they said, look, I want my severance pay, then they become entitled to their severance pay. And so the employer has to pay them their severance pay. If they are rehired, then they're rehired as new employees. But if they choose not to take the severance pay, they continue. And so their tenure with the previous employer continues with the new employer. So their severance pay would be from the predecessor employer to the successor employer. So you have that situation. You also have a situation where there's a redundancy situation. And let me just say, in a redundancy situation, termination ought not to be the first option.
Okay.
So the employer ought to find alternative work for the employees that are going to be terminated due to redundancy, even if the pay is lower than what they're getting now. And so if the pay is lower, then the employer has an option to accept that job. But his severance pay is preserved. And so when eventual
At which rate, though?
When eventual termination comes, his severance pay is calculated at the old higher rate.
Oh, okay, excellent. Yeah.
Not the new low rate, but the old higher rate.
Yeah.
And so that's a preservation, because you may have a business in trouble, probably financial trouble, and they're trying to rebuild. And so they don't want to lose their employees. And so they decide to, offer alternative jobs at a lower rate. That is acceptable under the law.
Yeah.
But the important thing is the payment of severance pay. When it becomes due, it goes back to the original higher rate. It is calculated at the original rate. So that is significant, and that must be noted. As I will say again, the first option in a redundancy situation is not for employees to be terminated. It is for, number one, the employees to be notified as early as possible that there may be a redundancy situation. And thereafter, they're kept abreast. And when that day comes, then their severance pay is worked out. And as they leave the business place for the final time, going through the door, they should have their severance pay in hand.
The ideal situation.
That's the ideal situation. And that's the law. Yeah. The law says severance pay shall be paid simultaneously upon termination.
Yeah.
And so the law envisages that severance pay, when you're going through the door, you're handed your pay package and you leave. And that's the end of the relationship.
Okay.
If somewhere down the road things rebound and they want to rehire you, they're free to do so. But once you would have received your severance pay, it's new employment.
Okay. So, speaking of that scenario, making reference to that scenario that you draw to just a while ago, in that the ideal situation, in fact, what the law requires is that you're handed your severance upon redundancy or termination. We know that's what the law requires, but we've seen many instances in this country where folks are terminated and severance payments and entitlements are not readily available, and folks are left languishing for months, years in some cases. And I say that to ask this question: what are your thoughts or the position of the Labor Department on the whole concept of a severance protection fund or anything of that nature?
Well, I can't talk as such for the Labor Department. What I can talk about is the National Labor Board. And it is something that the National Labor Board has considered. It is something that the National Labor Board has drafted. National Labor Board has drafted provisions for a redundancy fund. Yes, you're correct, where you have a number of businesses across Antigua that have closed their doors and the employees have been left holding the bag. And so years have passed and they have not received their severance pay. We usually advise employees to sue their employer for that severance pay because the law says that an employee can sue his employer or former employer for his severance pay in any court of competent jurisdiction.
Okay.
And so if you look at C55 subsection 1 of the Labor Code, it says an employee may recover by civil proceedings in a court of competent jurisdiction the severance pay to which he is entitled under the Act. Now, employees have been advised of this, and for some reason, they failed to take action.
Yeah.
Because a court of competent jurisdiction would be the industrial court.
Yes, yes.
Which would be much cheaper
Yeah.
than the High Court. Because the High Court, I want to believe, would have jurisdiction in the matter too. But you have the industrial court that has been set up to deal with workers' issues. And so for me, filing a matter in the industrial court would be the way to go. Because what is your evidence? That letter that you would have gotten from your employer stating that you are due severance pay, this is the amount. Sometimes the letter may say it will be paid on this particular day. That day comes and goes, and it's not paid. From the time that day comes and goes and you're not paid, for me, you should start thinking about filing suit. And because the employer would have acknowledged that they owe you that debt of severance pay. And so you show the court, this is what the employer wrote me and said. I worked for them for 12 years and I become eligible for severance pay upon them going out of business. And so I have not been paid. They said they will pay me at the end of May, 30th of May, and I have not received my severance pay. Therefore, I'm asking you to adjudicate on it. And so you have a judgment, which judgment you can enforce by registering it with the registrar of the High Court. So you move the matter now into the High Court so that you can recover your severance pay. That is the advice that we have given a lot of employees. But for some reason, they seem not to take the advice. And so they go along not receiving their severance pay, show up at the Labor Department's door, arguing about the severance pay, and we repeat it to them. Carry the matter to the industrial court because the law says any competent court. The industrial court is a competent court to deal with this matter.
Yeah.
And so move it into the industrial court, get a judgment. Then once you get that judgment, and the court would have given a time frame in which that judgment is to be settled. And when that time comes and goes and it's not settled, then you enforce it, right? You move it into the High Court and have it enforced there because the High Court will now order that probably assets of the organization be sold, and the what is recovered in the sale of those assets is paid to the workers as severance pay. You see, and so I would encourage any worker, if you promise your severance pay and you're not paid, especially if a time frame was given for it to be paid and it's not paid, move the matter into the court, enforce your rights. And so sue them as a civil debt or civil proceedings for your severance pay and see where it goes.
Yeah.
But for some reason, employees sit on their hands and do nothing. And then the other end of it now, they start arguing. Oh, I get no justice. But justice is there waiting you.
Correct, yeah.
But you're not reaching out to grab it.
Yeah.
You see? So I would like, if not for anything else, but for employees who have fallen into that misfortune, to seek to enforce their right and try and recover their severance pay through the courts. Because there is a way of enforcing industrial court judgments.
Now here's where we'll pause our discussion for today, but we'll have so much more in part 2 of our conversation on severance pay. But thank you for joining us for this edition of the Workers Podcast. Remember, new videos are uploaded every Friday on our YouTube channel.